very, very important, probably one of the most important things you can learn in science is how to write scientifically. And it is something that's not easy. It's hard. It's hard for us. It's hard for anybody who is trying to write scientifically because of the rules that science requires for how you write. So this is the first of 4 science writing workshops that you guys will have. You'll have assignments to go along with it to get you to thinking about scientific writing. If you can do this well, or if you can get started on the path to doing it well, before you even get to Emory, it is going to make your life that much easier. But understand, as Kimberly will tell you in a second, it is difficult and it takes practice. A lot of what you learn in high school isn't necessarily accurate scientific writing the way that a scientist or your professor would expect you to write. So that's something you're going to need to learn relatively quickly. So with that, this is Kimbria. She's going to be walking you guys through scientific writing, so enjoy it, have fun, take notes, learn, think about things, and you'll have assignments to do too. Cool. Kimbria, it's all yours.
Hey guys, how are you? Good.
Yeah, it won't lower.
Okay. Well, I'm Kimbria. I am a former Emory student. I'm an alumni. I graduated in 2011. I'm currently in pharmacy school at Mercer. So I've been where you are now. I've been at Emory. I was a pre-med student at first, and then at that first semester freshman year, I said, you know what? No, not med school for me. So I decided on pharmacy, which isn't that much different, but more in my alley, more my interest. So, welcome to Emory from alumni. I hope you guys are enjoying your time here and continue to enjoy your time here. I'm going to go over scientific writing. So, okay, you guys are pumped? I know you just had lunch, so you're kind of like waiting right now, but it's okay. We'll make it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a short introduction lecture about scientific writing. So, what is scientific writing? It is a method to communicate information about matters of science. Everyone get it? Yeah? Anyone want to kind of expound upon that or kind of ask questions about that? That's the simplest definition I can give you. Are we good with that definition? Okay. So, you guys, who's pre-med or thinking about going to some kind of science field or science major? Pretty much everyone. So your research, what you know, will matter not if you don't know how to communicate it. You can have the best experiment in the world with the best outcomes. If you can't communicate what you've done or what you have accomplished, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this is why it's important for you to understand how to communicate that effectively. So, like Drew said, in high school you learn about literary writing, essays and summaries and 5-paragraph style. Sound familiar to everybody? Kind of what you've done? Yeah, just kind of forget that and let's just start over, okay? Not saying that you do not know how to write, but I have to say that there's a different style. It's not hard, it takes practice, but it's doable. I taught the same class of high school students who are going to their junior year, senior year, so if they can learn something and accomplish it, I know that you guys can, okay? So don't feel nervous. So these are pretty much the rules. So these are kind of like your guidelines of scientific writing. So one thing you have to know is it's conventional. Rules are rules. It may not make sense. It may not be what you're used to, but when there's a rule in scientific writing, it's a rule. You can't break it. It's how it is. It's how people expect you to communicate. So you can't really break that mold, okay? It's not like your poetry classes where you can kind of do what you want. You kind of have to write within the rules of the style. Is that understood? Any questions about that? Not yet? Okay, good. So, it is clear. So you have to say and write exactly what you mean. You have to say and write exactly what you mean. You have to say and write exactly what you mean. So something that my high school students kind of get caught up on is he caught HIV. We know what that means, but in scientific writing, you can't say someone caught something. What does caught or catch mean? Like literally.
Physically grab.
Like physically put your hand in the air and catch it and grab it. Is that how you contract HIV? No, you just can't put your hand in the air and catch it, right? So you have to be clear. You have to say what you mean and write what you mean. Okay? It's concise. You get to the point. So I know in high school you go through these elaborate ways of making your writing colorful and make it interesting and to grab the audience attention. Does this sound familiar to you guys? Yeah, let's just scratch that. Don't do that. I'm not going to say that scientific writing is boring. I'm not going to say it's dry, but it's not very attention grabbing, like, hey, over here, this is what I have. It's very to the point. Communicate what happened, communicate what you have to say, and that's it. So I think this is probably where a lot of students struggle because you have been kind of trained to grab the audience attention and to kind of make it colorful and interesting. Yeah, that's not what you do here. Okay? Okay. It's also accurate, no guessing. This is really going to come into play when you're talking about your scientific lab reports or biology or orgo. You have to be accurate. You can't say I poured about 5 mils of water. Was it 5? Was it 5.5? You have to know exactly what it was. You can't guess. It has to be accurate. Okay. It's also very formal, so no slang or jargon. So what is slang versus jargon? Anyone know? You guys know. Don't be nervous. In back there.
Jargon is like local speech. Slang is like any words that are fitted to a certain culture.
Okay.
I guess slang would be informal language, something you use with like friends and stuff, and then jargon would be usually language like there's medical jargon, which is specifically medical terms, or like there would be more slang terms that would even be a jargon.
Exactly. So jargon is kind of like what you would use in a field or at a certain setting. Well, like in pharmacy school, we have our own jargon. We have our different abbreviations that only we kind of understand. Same with doctors that have their own. They may call something by a nickname that you kind of use only in the medical field. So that's jargon. Slang is kind of like what we can use just between us as friends or peers. So see the difference? So you can use none of that. If you must use jargon, there's an exception. You have to explain what it is first when you're writing, and then you can use the jargon if it's easier to use that jargon. But you just can't come off the bat using jargon because your audience may not know what you're talking about. Okay? And it's also objective. So the way I summarize this is tell it like it is and not how you feel about it. Does that sound simple enough? So you kind of have to put the information out there without projecting your own feelings or emotions or your own opinion on it. Does that make sense? Yes, no? So the key to scientific writing is the audience. You have to know who you're writing for. Like I was saying before with jargon. If you're writing for a group of high school students, and you're a doctor, you're going to have to change kind of how you write for the audience. Versus if you're a doctor writing for other doctors, you can be a little bit more formal. You don't have to explain every little thing that you write. So is that understood? The audience is the key. So for our classes purposes, we're going to write for someone who don't know what you're talking about. Like run-of-the-mill person. Let's not say like Joe Schmo, but another college student. So you're going to write formal enough where it isn't so dumbed down, but you're going to write simple enough so that it's not over someone's head. Okay? So you know what you're
Guys, this would be a vastly inappropriate time to be checking Facebook or chatting or doing other things. If you had those bad habits in high school, they will mess you up in college. So you need to be focused on what's going on in front of you and not talking with your friends. Sorry about that, Cambria. They didn't mean to be rude.
Okay. So here's some examples. You've seen it before. You all have read Time magazine, or you've read a newspaper article. You've read something that deals with science that's not necessarily a journal article, but believe it or not, you have been exposed to it. So this is an example. This is science non-specific. This is from sciencenow.com, something that if your mother or father wanted to go and learn something about science, they can just go here, and it's pretty simple to follow, okay? It's not really specific for a field. You can pick it up and read it, okay? So you also have like the expert style, which is kind of like a journal article. Anyone ever read a journal article or know what it's about? Raise your hand if you have been exposed to a journal article. Okay, so you know that it can be very dense. It can be very complex because they're really right for people who are in that field or have an idea of what they're talking about. So we're not really going to be on this level, but this is also an example of scientific writing that you may have been exposed to. And this is very general. This is kind of like New York Times, just regular National Geographic. It's in the waiting room of your doctor's office. Anyone can pick it up and pretty much read it. It's still science information. It's still communicating science ideas, but it's not on the level where you have to be an expert to read it. So you've all been exposed to these things, and so don't feel very overwhelmed about it. It's something that you've been exposed to. You just have to learn how to communicate it. Okay? Any questions so far? No? So we're going to kind of stick with this part of the spectrum for right now, and then as the class moves on, we'll kind of get to that expert level. But for right now, I just want you guys to kind of understand and read very simple journal, scientific topics. Okay? All right. So I'm going to move on to the next lecture, and I have a printout for you guys so you don't have to take so many notes. So you can pass this around. Right down the side. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over the very specific rules of scientific writing, and by tomorrow I want you guys to take one of the case studies that you did today or yesterday. Was it the Chernobyl?
They did 2 pots. Hologram. It's different from the one that, you did last year. But
Okay.
it'll still work.
Okay, great. So you'll take, is it a case study?
Yeah.
You'll take that case study and then you'll summarize it using the rules I teach you today. So pay attention. I've given you all the notes from the lecture, and I've given you a little room on the side to write your own notes. If you are confused or you need clarification, please stop me. We can have an all-out discussion. We have plenty of time, because I do want you guys to make the most of these summaries. The summaries will be due tomorrow at 11 a.m. And what I typically do is I pick maybe 3 or 4 random papers. I block out your name, and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll edit it as a class. Is that fair? So don't be nervous. I might pick your paper, might not. Yes.
Are we emailing these?
Yes. Does everyone have computer access, internet access?
No.
No, don't have internet.
Well, I guess we'll find out when we get back to
Yeah, you
Yeah,
should
you
back to the
should.
dorm, and you can always log on, hopefully using somebody else's computer, and do it that way. Or you can come in the morning and submit it that way via email.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start. Everyone has a paper, a packet? All right, so we got to talk about this earlier, about how scientific writing is a method to communicate information about matters of science. So we got that, got an idea of it. Now let's get very specific. The main point here is to communicate information. Like I said, I don't want to know how you feel about it. I don't want to know how someone else feels about it or how colorful you can make it sound. I just want to know the facts, okay? So the basics. The purpose is to deliver information to the audience. So the audience should be able to read, comprehend, and reproduce information you give. All 3. Okay? So when I say reproduce, that's more towards like lab reports when you start to write up the things you did in lab. Someone should be able to pick up your lab report and say, okay, this is what they did, and do exactly what you did, and hopefully get the same results. When it comes to just a summary that you have to do tonight, when I say reproduce, I mean they should be able to read, comprehend, and actually communicate back to me what they've read, okay? So it has to be very clear, very concise, and if the audience have to ask questions about what you meant, then you have to do it again. It's not valid, okay? Anyone have any questions about that, what I mean by do it again or it's not valid? Concerns? You guys look puzzled. I just want to make sure that I'm not losing anyone. Stop me if you want. Okay. So, like I said before, the purpose of this class, your audience is going to be novice audience. So, one of your peers who's going to be like your roommate in the fall, or someone who's intelligent enough to understand, but not quite an expert in the field. Okay. So, don't feel pressure to be an expert when you're writing a summary. Just kind of give me information that you know. Okay? So, tidbits. You only include information that is pertinent to the topic. You only include information that is pertinent to the topic. You only include information that is pertinent to the topic. I think that a lot of people struggle with this because when you're reading, everything seems important, right? Everything seems like is important to the topic. It's not. I suggest you guys to proofread. I suggest that you guys ask yourself, what is this article trying to tell me? And what in this article is relevant to the main topic? It sounds simple, it sounds redundant, it sounds elementary, but I promise you, when we go over these papers tomorrow, this is going to be a biggie. Okay? Any questions about it? Any questions about finding out what the main topic is? Any questions about finding information that supports the topic? No? Okay. And be honest and unbiased and present opposing sides. So it's really easy for you to communicate scientific matters and kind of put your own bias. Just because you don't say, I believe this or I think this, does not mean that you're not biased. So if there is an opposing side, don't neglect that opposing side. You have to include it also. It's all important to the topic. Is that clear? All right, so we just went over this. So we went over convention, being formal, objective, clear, concise. One thing that we did not go over earlier was fluidity. What do I mean by fluidity? Anybody? Fluidity, yes.
Like the way it flows. It's not like choppy. It's understandable.
Right. Anyone else have anything to add to that? She said the way it flows. Right.
Like the sentences connect. Like don't go from one idea to the next. Like if sentences like have connecting groups.
Right.
Writing in a way so that readers can understand what it is.
Right. One thing I see a lot with students is sometimes in your search to find the main ideas, they will just circle the main sentences and then they'll summarize in their own words those sentences and then put them together. And when you read it, it's like, okay, you're talking about this here, that here, this, and another thing here. To prevent this from happening, you may have to read whatever you're summarizing more than once to really understand what you've read. If you find yourself going through and summarizing main sentences, it's going to sound choppy. I guarantee you. It's going to sound choppy when someone reads it, and when you read it aloud, we're not going to be able to follow you. So just make sure that to prevent not being fluid, just make sure you summarize the main ideas in your own words. Understand it and then pretty much summarize it. Okay? Questions? This is also a biggie. I'm taking my time because I know that these are the mistakes that we're going to run into. All right, so concision. So what did I mean by concision? Pop quiz. What do you say by concision? Or to be concise?
Get to the point.
Get to the point, right? Anyone else? So I like to think of concision in terms of dictionary versus thesaurus. So in scientific writing, which one do you think would be the best, a dictionary or thesaurus? Who says thesaurus? Who says dictionary? So anyone from the thesaurus side want to tell me why?
The source would be the most clear and like straight to the point because you're finding synonyms for words.
Okay. Dictionary side?
Well, you have to put the difference between the words and the similarity of the words, so therefore you have to know exactly what the word means if you've never seen it before.
Okay. So I'm going to go with the dictionary side because just like my whole catch example, catch is a synonym for contract in some ways, but when you get to the definition of the word, really one word is right. So when you're in school, in high school, they kind of push you to learn different words and use different words that mean the same thing. In scientific writing and in college, you have to use the right word. Okay? So I don't mean literally go to a dictionary and define things. If you have to kind of, if you're between two words, then I would say, yeah, go to a dictionary and define which one is the correct one to use in this situation. They both may be right, but there's really, when you get down to it, one word that would be correct. Okay? All right, so you want to avoid synonyms. And the reason you want to do this is because you don't want to open up your paper to interpretation. You want the audience to read it for what it is and understand it for what you wrote. Not read it and interpret it on their own, because then your meaning is lost in translation. What you really meant is not even there anymore. Anyone confused about this? Ask questions. We're a family. There's no shame.
In grading papers, guys, lab reports and papers, I have taken off major points for people using one wrong word in a sentence, because it changes the meaning of the sentence. In science, the meaning of the sentence is what matters. I need to get that information across to you. If you use the wrong word, you've changed the meaning of the sentence, which could change the entire meaning of what you're trying to tell me. Those words, each word is very important. Each word matters in a sentence. So that's where concision helps.
Also, don't be too specific. You don't have to, let's see how I say this nicely. We know that you're intelligent, and don't assume that your audience is dumb. Assume that they're just as intelligent as you are, so you don't have to be so specific where you're just feeding this point in, and you kind of lose the flow of the rest of the paper. Is that understood? Okay. And use the active voice and not the passive voice. Anyone have an example of active versus passive? Okay.
Had been walking. Had been walking.
Versus
Wasn't walking.
it's still passive.
Like, the active voice would be the person who threw the ball versus the passive, which is the ball was thrown by the person.
Exactly. Everyone get that? Everyone hear that? Okay. This is something that's kind of difficult to teach. It's one of those things that you have to kind of make a mistake first and go back and say, let's go kind of passive. So proofreading is kind of important here, and I'm pretty sure we'll see a lot of examples tomorrow when we go over each other's paper. So the take-home message here is to use the word that would not confuse the audience. And the audience sometimes is your teacher. If you confuse your professor, they're not going to ask you what you meant. They're not going to take the time to ponder it. It's just wrong, whatever, and they move on. Question?
Yeah, where you said don't be too specific and act like the person is already as intelligent as you are. Well, in high school, which I think we're deleting down the past, we were kind of told to act like whoever's reading what you're writing doesn't know what you're talking about, so you can get your point across.
Yes and no. We're going to write for someone who may not know specifically what this article or what this topic is about, but they're not elementary school students. They're just like you, they just don't know something, okay? So I would say read it. The key here is proofreading. Proofread it. If it makes sense to you, it should make sense to your audience. You don't have to beat that topic into their head if they don't know anything, because sometimes even professors feel like, okay, this is an insult, or they may feel you're just using up words, you're just using up space. Be as concise as you can, and it comes with using the right word. If you use the right word, and if you're concise and you give information, you shouldn't have to keep repeating yourself.
Kimberly brings up a really good point. Professors were students too. We know that a 2-page paper, how long it should be, how many words you should use in general. So when you guys change your margins around and add quotes and do all kinds of other things, the best way to put it is it pisses us off.
As I say, it's just annoying.
It's just annoying. It just makes us mad. You don't want us mad when we're reading your paper. There are 19 of you and 1 of me, and I have to read everything that you write. You don't want me mad. You want me happy. You want me happy and looking over your paper really quickly, see if I see any big errors, and I can move on and your paper's safe. Don't make those common little mistakes. Don't put extra words into something because, oh, I don't think this is big enough. I don't think I've said enough words to cover it. If you're concise and accurate, I'm happy. You've covered what I needed you to cover, and you've said it in an appropriate way. If you think you need to add fluff, you don't understand the topic, and I already know that you don't understand the topic. So that's important.
I had a question about the conclusions of like lab reports. Like we still do that, right? When we write college lab reports, there's still like the objective and then procedure, conclusion. There's all of that same stuff, right? The same components to it, or is it different?
There is, and I have a whole lecture on that report that we're going to go over in the 3rd class, but there is a skeleton that we pretty much use, and different professors may ask for something added, something taken away. So we have a whole lecture on that, and in general, yes, but no. But but it's a whole lecture on that, so we'll go over that in the 3rd class, okay? Drew, do you have a comment on that?
I don't. It is different but similar is the best way to put it. Our lab report expectations are different than what you would do in high school. They're going to be very different in some places, particularly procedures. It's very, very different than what you're used to, and that makes it even harder. But we'll get there. Third one.
So any questions about concision? No? Okay. Then move on. All right, so the key to concision is recognizing and eliminating zeros. So what is a zero? It's words or phrases that don't give meaning to the main idea. It's called filler. So sometimes, like Drew said, you would have whole paragraph that's just filler. And professors will X it out in their big red pen or scratch it out, make it as ugly as possible, and they don't even consider that a part of your paper. It happens. It's happened to me in college. It's happened to Drew in college. It would happen to you in college because
All of us.
yeah, because realistically, 25-page paper. If 3 of your pages are filler, they're going to X it out, and they don't consider it anything.
Mm-hmm.
And now you only have 22 pages. Happens. So your job is to eliminate these zeros. I have an example box here, and I want you guys to recognize what phrases or words are zeros. So the first example is, it is interesting to know that the heart pumps ... What's a zero or the zeros in this first sentence?
It's interesting to know.
Right. You can just start with the heart pumps. That's the fact. That's accurate. That's concise. No filler. Gets your point. Like I said, it's not colorful. It's not interesting. It's just the facts. Okay? What about the next one? Sure enough, a petri dish is used to grow blank and blank.
Sure.
Okay. A petri dish is used to grow blank. Of course, the temperature was adequate.
Of course.
Okay, of course. The fact is,
You don't have anything.
just that whole thing. Okay? That whole thing is not necessary. Okay? The cells are extremely beautiful.
Then trying to
We don't care how you feel about the cells. Like I said, it's not about how you feel or your opinion. It's the facts. Okay? We're just gonna move on. All right. So you want to be specific. You want to explain exactly what occurred, and you don't want to leave room for interpretation or confusion. So When I say be specific, I mean tell me exactly what you mean by that. So let's go over some examples. The subjects cause many problems. Anyone have an alternative to this sentence? Anyone see anything wrong with this sentence? Okay.
You're not told what subjects or what problems.
Right. In scientific writing, you just can't leave it open, okay? If this was a study about, I don't know, about mice and the size of their liver, we don't know what problems that may come up in that topic. Were they too rowdy? Were they not, big enough? Like, we don't know what problems we're talking about. So you have to be specific and explain every little thing. To you, it may seem redundant because you've done the experiment or you've read the article, and to keep writing it out is kind of like, well, I know this, but your audience don't know. So you have to be specific. What about this? The car went fast.
How fast?
How fast? What kind of car? Talking about like a real car where like 110 is fast, or like a little toy car where 50 miles per hour is fast? You don't know. Be specific, okay? The plants grew to be a normal height.
What's the normal height?
What's normal for a plant? A sunflower that's like 7 feet tall, or grass that's like, this is pretty tall for grass, right? So you have to be specific. You have to specify what you're talking about because your audience don't know what a normal height of your plant is. You have to tell us, okay? Any questions about being specific? All right, so simplify these phrases. Perform a study. How do you simplify that? To be concise. Perform a study. Anyone? Study. Study. Make use of. Use, right? Make measurement of. Make a decision. Make a proposal. Okay. So you see that this is not an incorrect way to write these things, but there's a more correct way to be concise. It may seem nitpicky, and it is, and that's the nature of scientific writing. It's very particular, very specific, kind of nitpicky. And you'll see when you guys get into some of your classes, you're going to get so mad at the professor because you're going to say, they know what I meant, or now I'm just being nitpicky. You're right. And that's the nature of it. You have to be very concise. Do you have comments?
No, that's pretty much exactly it. Is you need to convince me you know what you're talking about. It's not my job to interpret what you said and make sure that it makes sense. That's not what I'm there for. You're there to make sure I know what you're talking about. That's what a paper should look like.
And also, when your professor is reading a paper, they want to know the facts. So when they have to dig through your paper to find the facts, it becomes annoying. And at that point, they're just going to X everything out. And they're just going to give you a lower grade. Only because they had to dig so deep to get to your point. Okay? These are warnings. Okay, so be clear. Keep it simple. So I'm sorry. I regret to inform you that we are not impressed by the words you use in college. I know in high school, SAT words, they want you to use more words and know more words, which is great. But I've known some students who would obsess over every word and go to the thesaurus or a dictionary to find a grandest word that would fit there. It's annoying. It's insulting. It's a waste of time. Don't waste your time trying to find the best word, like the biggest word you can find that no one really uses in the English language to communicate your point. That's not the point of scientific writing. It's very basic. The topic that you're going to be writing about is going to be complex enough that you don't have to dress it up with big words. Okay? Be clear. But sometimes when you use those big words, your meaning kind of get lost in translation. And your professor is not going to take the time to look up what that word means if he doesn't know. And he's just going to feel insulted and he's going to give you a bad grade. It happens. Okay? So, complex sentences confuse the audience. I'm not saying use 3-word sentences. I'm not saying, it should have a goal of no sentence should go over 1 line. But don't make it harder than it has to be. If you need 3 sentences to explain one thing, that's totally fine, as long as it's fluid and clear. Don't obsess over making it pretty or making it look like you're intelligent. We know that you're intelligent. You're at Emory. You don't have to prove that to anyone, ever. Just communicate, okay? Any questions about that? Any forms? Anyone want to like duke it out about it? Anyone feel passionately about their long sentences and big words? No? Okay, good. All right, so I know this goes against all of high school teaching, but you have to shorten your sentences to clarify your point. And again, this goes back to proofreading. If you're reading and reading your sentence and you kind of get lost in what you're trying to say, you probably need to cut that sentence up a little bit. Just a little bit, maybe 2 to 3. But you do need to have a variety of sentences. Don't make it sound choppy, where you're so concerned about making short sentences that you kind of lose the point of the paper. And you have to decide what information is important and what's not. So this comes into play when you have to explain something that's very complex in a short amount of paper space. So you may have a 1-page paper where you have to explain something very complex. You're going to have to proofread that thing about 3 times to cut down sentences you really don't need. And believe me, you're going to have to cut down probably 1/3 of it. It's necessary. You have to do it. Okay? Any questions about that? All right, so let's practice some more and simplify these words. Activate. Start. Analyze. Component. Part. Commence. Start. Begin. So these are not hard words, but let's not use this like old English language where you try to feel like very formal and very intelligent. That's not the point. Get to the point. Tell me what you mean what you say, and you should be good. Okay? All right. So identify what part of the sentence is important. So if you have an issue of proofreading your own paper and you can't decide what part of the sentence is important, what part of the sentence isn't, ask yourself again, what's the main topic? What do I want to say about the main topic? What can I cut out? What in this paper does not contribute to the main topic? Many times you will see that there's a lot of interesting information in these articles. There's a lot of interesting facts. Just because it's interesting doesn't mean that it belongs in your paper. Is that clear to everyone? Questions about that? Okay, we'll see tomorrow. Be familiar. So you have to cater to your audience. I'm not saying use slang or jargon, but you have to use a language that the audience will understand. If you don't, it's like if you don't know any language but English and it's Chinese and you just can't read it. It's the same thing. Okay? If you have to use complex words or concepts, don't dumb it down. It is what it is. If it's something that's complex, it's complex. You can't help that. But what you do have to do is define them in terms that your audience will understand. Okay? So if you have to make more than one sentence to explain it, that's fine. Be clear and keep it professional. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to try. So I'm a person who's Joe Schmo, and I've just been diagnosed with full-blown AIDS. How would you explain to me what AIDS is? I have no idea what it is.
It's a disease that attacks your immune system, which is a system of your body that keeps you from getting sick. So it's a lot easier for you to get sick, and if you do get sick, it's usually more harmful than if you were healthy.
Okay? So what you said there is a disease that attacks my immune system, right?
Yes.
So just like lupus, so is AIDS similar to lupus? Lupus also attacks your immune system.
No.
What makes it different?
Sexually transmitted.
It's sexually transmitted. What else?
Doesn't AIDS affect the helper T cells or something?
Okay.
That would be-
Right? It's something that AIDS does that lupus doesn't do. That's different from any other disease I may have or may think of. Anyone else?
It's a retrovirus that's constantly changing.
Okay, it's constantly changing. So you see that I may not understand what it is, but if you explain it very simple, I'm going to think, oh, okay, well, that's fine. That's kind of similar to something else I know about. You have to be specific. You have to be clear. You have to include all the information to put across your point in the way that the audience will understand. Okay? Okay. So, the use of jargon. So jargon, we already explained, is the language or words that you use within a group or organization or a profession. So if you have to use jargon, and sometimes when you're looking at these journal articles, they will use jargon, you have to explain it first. Most times jargon is used in the form of abbreviations. So all you have to do is just explain what abbreviation is, and then you can use abbreviation thereon after. Okay? For the purpose of our class, don't use jargon. Just explain it. Keep it simple. Okay? And the reason we don't use jargon is because it can be misleading or confusing, especially if you don't explain it first. You can kind of lose your audience in your writing. Okay. Descriptions. So in science, there's a lot of complex ideas that you have to explain, and you have to be descriptive. You have to explain what these things are. You have to be accurate, you have to be concise at the same time, and you have to make sure that your point is given across. Okay? You can use analogies, but be very careful with analogies. You can kind of bring it home so that someone can understand it, but don't oversimplify the analogy. Any questions? Anyone? All right, so illustrations. Sometimes, I don't expect you guys to do it for tonight's homework with illustrations, but in the future, in college, when you're writing your papers, you may have to use illustrations to describe your point, and that's totally fine. But you have to use the appropriate illustration for the appropriate topic. Okay, so I have an example here. If I said, a kidney primarily filters blood in the glomerulus portion of the nephron, and I gave you this picture, would you be able to understand that sentence? Is it giving any kind of description to what I'm trying to convey? Okay. So what if I gave you this picture and I said the same thing?
Much better.
Much better? Why is it much better?
You can see the glomerulus and you can see the nephron, see exactly how it works.
You can see the blood and you can see the blood out. So this is a good example. Some people will just try to put a picture that'll be pretty. No, you can't do that in scientific writing. You don't care how pretty it is. You have to actually use a picture that's appropriate for what you're trying to convey. Okay? Like I said, I don't expect you guys to use pictures in this class, but in the future, in your 4 years here at Emory, you may have to, and it's all about using the most appropriate picture. Okay? All right. So ensure accuracy and select your words carefully. Do not confuse the audience. So if I said that cholera is a disease that affects your digestive tract, do you have a good idea what cholera is? Do you think that one sentence gives you a good idea?
No.
Anyone know what cholera is, by the way? Anyone heard of cholera? Okay, so cholera pretty much is a disease that you get from drinking like tainted water, and it pretty much gives you really, really bad diarrhea to the point that you die within 24 hours. So cholera is not just a disease that affects the digestive tract. Stomach virus is something that affects your digestive tract, or gas is something that affects your digestive tract. But cholera is not one of those things, okay? So this is what I mean by be descriptive. It's not pretty to say diarrhea, but that's what cholera is. That's what's unique to cholera. Just like with AIDS, it's not pretty to say sexually transmitted disease, but that's what it is, okay? You have to be descriptive. All right, and a vaccine is given by needle. Does that give you any clue to what a vaccine is? No, not really. So is a tattoo. So is a piercing. Is that different from a vaccine? Yes, very different. So you have to be very descriptive, okay? Yes.
How can we be descriptive and yet concise?
Perfect.
The $64,000 question.
You, as the writer, have to decide what's the main point. Okay? I think everything kind of goes back to what's the main idea I want to convey here. So, if, in a cholera example, if you just want, if the main point is it gives you diarrhea, you don't have to go into the specifics of exactly what receptor in the body it affects. You just have to give the main idea points. Is that clear? Anyone else have a question? You have a question? Okay. So, good question. How do you be concise and descriptive? Only give the information that you need to convey the main idea. If you go back and you read your papers, or you read the paper that you're going to summarize, you're going to find a lot of interesting information. You're going to find a lot of descriptive information. Ask yourself what the main idea is, and only include information that's about the main idea. Questions? Good question.
Guys, this is difficult to do. It's difficult for professors to do it well, and their livelihood depends on being able to write properly in scientific writing. So keep that in mind. It is an ongoing process that you will be learning for years to come.
Okay, using the first person. I would just say don't do it. Just don't. It becomes harder when you're talking about lab reports. But in order to put your best foot forward, just put in your mind that it's forbidden. Okay? Sometimes you just probably can't find a different way to do it, but it should be like almost like a life-changing thing if you do.
Mm-hmm.
You should be so avoided that you feel like you committed a sin by doing it. Is that clear to everybody? Don't put yourself in the paper. It's not about you. It's not about what you've done. It's about the science and the information. Take yourself out of it as much as you can. Don't do it. Does everyone know what I mean by the first person? No? What's the first person? Just so that we're all clear.
We.
I, we, us, no. It's a thing. Okay? Alright, so these are little things that make a big difference. It's like the little small things that kind of get on the professor's nerves if they read it. It's kind of like those things, like nitpicky things that they will deduct, but they don't tell you why, or they don't tell you, you know, that it's against the rules, but they will take off for it. So, for numbers. If the number can be written in 2 words or less, write it out. Okay? For example, 200, 1, 500, for something like 598, that's more than 2 words, you would write out the number. Okay? Is that clear? So some professors have their own preference for that. As like a steadfast, like accepted rule, do this. If they say something different, then do what they say. But this is the rule, okay? A lot of students get confused when they do lab reports and they have to write a number first to start a sentence. Try not to.
Never.
If you absolutely have to, then just write it out. Like not 500, but actually write out 5 with F-I-V, okay? That. There are exceptions to this rule. Negative numbers, decimals, measurements, page numbers, percentages, and currency. You write those out as is. Okay? So here's an example here. What's easier for you to read? 55 milliliters per kilogram per hour, or actually read this as 55 milliliters per kilogram per hour? What's easier? The first one or the second one? The first one. And that's exactly how you will write it out. So measurements, you want to write it. And please never do this where you write 5 hours. It's one, I don't know why it's one of those things. It's just one of those things that's like, oh, you could just put 5 HR. You know, just don't do it. Any questions about that? I know it sounds really small and really like it doesn't matter, but it does matter.
And so you said if we were writing and we had to write 5 hours, you rather us write.
The number 5 HR.
Okay.
I know it sounds informal, but that's how we do it in science. It's just one of those things. Unless you're starting out a sentence with the number 5 or 5 hours, try to not start out a sentence with that. And if you have to, just write out FIVE hours. Only if you have to. It's like one of those things where if you do it, you feel like you committed something really bad. Okay? Any questions? All right, pronouns. Oh my gosh. So guys, this is another thing. You cannot use pronouns. I'm not gonna say never ever, but it's one of those things that if you really have to, you feel bad about it.
I'll say it. Never ever use pronouns. Ever.
It messes things up. And you may not see it now, but when someone is reading it, it's just one of those things that's confusing. So here's an example. Group A and B were given tablets to take in the morning. They took the tablets at 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. What do I mean by they? Who's they?
You could have been in different cycles.
Okay, so they could mean Group A, they could mean Group B, it could mean Group A and Group B. We don't know which one took it at 9, which one took it at 10. Did they both take it at 9 and 10? We don't know. We don't know. This is where being descriptive comes back in. Instead of using these pronouns and to be like shorthand, you just have to write it out again. It sounds redundant, it sounds silly, but you have to do it. Otherwise, you get something like this and it's very confusing. Any questions about that, about pronouns? What are pronouns? Do you guys know what they are? Like they, give some examples so we all clear. We, us, our, yeah, those are forbidden. Okay?
It is a very common one. When you're talking about an instrument, a piece of equipment, especially in the sciences, it is very easy to say. Never say it. I don't know what it you're talking about when I'm reading, and I don't want to have to go back and find out what you just wrote to me. Tell me what it is. The computer, the FPLC, the fax, whatever it is that you're working with, don't use it, because it's the easiest one. He and she, that one, usually you don't use, unless you've named your mice or something like that, which happens, but use their names.
So what if we like establish what it is first and then later on in the same
Never.
sentence?
Now, that only works for an abbreviation where, like AIDS, for example. AIDS is an acronym. You establish what AIDS means the first time you use it. After that, you can say AIDS. It can change from sentence to sentence. So it doesn't work for that one.
Any other questions about pronouns? I know you're attached to them. We've used them forever, but they must die. They must we must never see them again.
Would you rather us put like the computer blah 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 comma, and then if you're saying like the computer again, would you rather have like a sentence with 2 nouns in it instead of using a pronoun? Like, wouldn't that get annoying?
Finish the sentence. Let me hear the sentence.
Okay, let me think of something.
Like when I turn the computer on it.
Okay, yeah, the computer wasn't working, but we took the computer to the store. Or the computer wasn't working, so we took the computer to the store. You would rather us, right?
There's some other technical issues in there, but that would be
yeah.
okay to
I was
say.
just
That's
like-
okay because it's off the top of your head. That would be fine. Repeat it again. Okay, something you need to know about scientific writing, it is highly repetitive. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this. You repeat yourself so many times, you get tired. Yes. In any document that you have, you're going to repeat yourself over and over and over again. It's something you have to get used to. It's part of scientific writing because of all these rules that we have, because we don't use it or they or something like that. You constantly have to refer to the item itself. So you can't use pronouns. And so, yeah, it is repetitive.
And sometimes you have something like that where it doesn't seem like there's another way. Just redo the whole sentence. Like redo the structure of the sentence. And to make it a little easier for the audience to read. Yeah, it does sound redundant, so just do it over. Like, don't get attached to these sentences that you guys make. Like, don't get attached to your papers. It's not that deep. What's really serious is that the audience or your professor understand what you're trying to say. Okay? I saw another hand on that side, yes.
So if we write one sentence with a specific subject, but then we have to immediately write another sentence after that sentence that has the same subject, we just repeat the subject then instead of saying it.
You don't have to have the same sentence structure where it sounds redundant, but you have to state it again. All right, punctuation. Use periods and commas appropriately. That, anyone have any questions about that? Because it sounds funny, but people do use periods and commas inappropriately. Yeah, okay. All right, when you're using a colon, this is a pet peeve of mine. The format to use a colon is you have a complete thought, you have the colon, and then you have a list. Okay? So between A and B, which one is correct? Okay. Who says A? Who says B? So A is correct because it's a complete thought. Just think of it as the colon being a period. Okay? It's a period in the colon. It's a period. It has to be a complete thought, and then the list follows after the colon. Okay? And for this class, and forever and ever, don't use dashes or semicolons. I know it sounds weird, guys, but scientific writing is very concise and very to the point where you don't have to use dashes and semicolons to start a new sentence or use a comma, but don't use it. Just periods, colons, and commas. Not dashes and semicolons. Okay? So, do you feel like this girl here? It's like it's a lot? You don't understand? Yes? No? Okay. It's okay, because scientific writing takes lots of practice. Even I am not an expert in it. It's nothing scarier to me than a blank Word document. It is scary. Sometimes I just type just random things on there so I can just feel like it's not blank. Even though it's like, lyrics to a song, it, in my mind, it's better than nothing. Okay? So don't fret if it's not easy to you, because it's going to take lots of practice. You're not going to be an expert in it after this class. But on the other side of the coin, no one's going to teach you this. But the expectation when you get to college is that you already know this. Okay? One more tidbit that I forgot to put in there is we don't use quotes in scientific writing. I know, clutch your pearls, I get it. We don't use quotes.
Write that down.
We don't use quotes. It's something that I keep forgetting to put in here, but I remember when it comes across, but to prevent you guys making that mistake, we do not use direct quotes. Any questions about that? Okay. So what's your homework assignment for tonight?
Submit a one-page double-spaced document about our two-part hologram. Practice skills.
Using the skills you learned today, so you have the printout here, so you don't have to remember every single thing. It's all there for you to use. Please refer to it. The email address I want you guys to send that to should be on the paper on the last slide there. Any questions? I want you guys to do this right, and I want you guys to benefit from it. So any questions about anything I just talked about? Yes.
Do you want us to use like a topic sentence, like in English, or topic sentences?
Go right into it. I don't want to see any introductions. I don't want to see any topic sentences. Just go right into it. Confused? Yes.
Is there a specific heading we should be using?
Heading?
Yes.
I'm not going to count that. No, I just want you to go right into it. Just type it, put your name on it. That's all I want. Yes.
So we just talk about what we did, or
So summarize the case. Summarize what you did, what you learned, the research that you found, and what you learned from the case. So, and using in scientific writing. So that means you're going to have to explain what you learned. What is the difference between a hologram and Pepper's ghost? How are they different? Why do people think that they are similar? How are they different?
Are there like no paragraphs then? Like if we just go right into it?
What do you mean?
Like you said, you don't want us writing topic sentences. So how are we supposed to break up? But
You guys are open thinking. relax. Everyone breathe in, breathe out. I want you, it's only one page. If you have to use a different paragraph, use a different paragraph to break it up. But you don't have to put first, second, the main idea was just give me the facts. Make sure it's fluid, make sure it flows, make sure I can read it and it makes sense. But don't overthink it, just give me the facts. I know it's, and I would even suggest you guys to write in the style that you're used to. If it helps you to just start with the introduction, do it, go for it. For me, when I type in so much slang because it helps me put my ideas on paper. And then when you go back and proofread it, you can clean it up. But at least your ideas are there. Okay, so if it helps you to do the 5-paragraph style and then like shrink it down, it'll take you so much time. But whatever makes you feel comfortable, I don't have to see your first draft. So do that, go through it, erase, and voila. That's like the best way to write. I guarantee you. I still do it. I'm in my pharmacy program. I'll be Dr. Brown in 2 years. I still write in slang and crazy sentences and swears and everything. Everything I can think of, just to put it on paper, and then I go back and I clean it up. But you have to clean it up.
Yeah,
You can't write swears in your paper and not clean it up. You have to. Any other questions? Any other anxiety points about this assignment? We're family, guys. We're gonna grade for this paper. Your name will be X'd out so no one will know who it belongs to unless you voluntarily tell them. But yeah, that's your assignment.
Are like eager to make things when you're in high school and English class, like just band words, they can't use is or and or what and stuff. But is that a big concern?
I would say go for it and we'll see when we get there. I'm not sure. Yes.
Okay, so about the passive active voice thing. If Microsoft Word doesn't catch it as passive voice, it should be acceptable, right? Because I'm really bad about passive voice because in chemistry when we did lab reports, it was passive voice. Like that's what you were supposed to do.
That's the conflict with scientific writing. When you're writing a summary, it's never passive. When you're writing a lab report, sometimes you can't avoid it. And we'll talk about that when we get to that portion. But for this purpose, active voice. If you have to reconstruct this whole sentence or idea, do that. But active voice.
But like if Microsoft Word doesn't flag it as passive, it should be fine, right?
Don't rely on, what she's trying to say is don't rely on Word to tell you. You need to know how to do it. Rely on Word for spelling, but its grammar is based on general writing grammar. You're not writing general writing anymore. You're scientific writing. Don't use that. I know it's there and it exists and it's really nice that it exists, but it's not accurate. And it will get you in trouble sooner or later. So it's better right now if you start to learn to do it on your own and not rely on Word to do it for you. Say it again?
I'm gonna have to get the English book.
That's okay. You're here to learn. That's what college is about.
Any other questions about it? No one's going to teach you this in college, guys, but the expectation is that you already know it. So while we're here, ask me. I'll let you know. We're good? Okay. 11 a.m. tomorrow. I'll get 19 different papers, right? Everyone's going to submit it, and I'll choose at random 3 or 4 that we're going to go over in class. Okay? All right. You guys doing great.
Thank you.